My name's Peter Van Deusen, and I founded Brain Trainer International nearly 30 years ago. For most of that time, I've been training my own brain and those of others. Brain Trainer has combined my work and that of many others to produce a unique system of allowing people to change their own brains. The way we see the brain and the way we train it is very different from the traditional approaches used in most other systems. Our tools and our results combine sophisticated understanding with a convenient, cost-effective, easy-to-use system that's been extremely successful in dozens of countries around the world for hundreds of professionals and thousands of individuals with a broad range of goals. We continue to innovate newer and better approaches to transform everyday people's lives. Today, I'm going to talk about creativity, a topic of great interest to me. My own creativity has always been one of my favorite parts of myself. For several decades in my early life, I was a professional photographer. I wrote music, stories, and plays. Through the work I've done, managing change in large organizations or developing unique ways of looking at brain training, it's been the creative flashes that I most enjoyed and which brought the most success. I've also paid attention to creative people whose work I respect, talking about their own experiences. I believe the idea that creativity comes from our brains is simply wrong. Creativity doesn't come from our brains, it comes through our brains. In previous presentations, I've suggested that there are two major roles our brains can perform. The first of these we call processing. It's performed in the cortex, the outer layer of the brain, the thinking brain. We think, we learn, we compare each new experience with the past experiences stored in our brain's association areas. That's the conscious mind. It watches TV, tracks social media, plans and organizes, writes papers, explains things, and thinks about them. The conscious mind is our ego, our self, and for many, it's the whole of their experience. One of my favorite quotes about the conscious mind is this: great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and little minds discuss people. I would add, creative minds don't discuss. The conscious mind is not creative. Creativity is not processing. It's discovery. It's beyond sensing and acting. It's beyond ego and self. Creativity is spiritual. Going back millennia, we find the concept of God being defined not as some bearded old man in the sky, but as the creative force in the universe. So that leads us to the second major role of the brain. It is an antenna. Processing is done in the conscious mind, the cortex. The antenna operates in the subcortex, our subconscious and unconscious levels. It has the capacity to give us access to the creative forces, as well as other phenomena that don't fit neatly into the linear, deterministic world of Western science. The ego separates us from the rest of the universe. The antenna connects us. The music you hear from a radio doesn't come from the radio. The radio includes an antenna designed to capture fields outside the range of our senses. If you don't believe in radio, if you never turn one on, you'll never accept that you spent your entire life in the midst of music and talk that you can't hear. The same is true for the spiritual dimension, the creative and connective element that runs through everything. We're surrounded by evidence of its existence, but we're also surrounded by people who block or never develop their antenna, so they're unable to experience it. Their conscious minds make them much too intelligent to believe in such a foolish idea. That's why in whole brain training, whether HEG or EEG, there are two complementary and opposing states that we seek to develop. Yes, we want to learn to climb, to concentrate, to close our focus, to process mentally. But we also want to learn to dive, to enter pure consciousness and awareness states, to open our focus and listen for the still small voice of the spirit. When clients come to us to become peak performers, they want their brains to improve ability to access what we call the zone or the flow or the peak state, which allows us to perform at very high levels very efficiently. It's an ego-free state without thinking, without trying or judging. Many fewer people are interested in reaching their creative selves, but this is the very same peak state that gives us access to the spiritual and creative parts of being. The conscious ego state is arrogant. Operating without an antenna, it believes it can be God. Nothing more is needed beyond logic, thinking, and technology. The creative subconscious antenna is humble. Aware of the whole, it recognizes itself as a part. Now, these two can work together, but only in the correct way. The still awareness state is when truly creative work can come through. The processing state is the editor. Mozart may not have needed to edit his work, but most artists do find it useful to do so. I've heard several great writers report that first they create. They may end up with twice as much material as they need. So then they edit what has come through them, paring it down to make it more effective and coherent. Both of these can be important, but allowing the editor to enter during the creative process kills the process. A technique often used to generate new ideas is called brainstorming. A group of people sit down with a problem and just begin throwing out ideas without worrying about whether they're feasible. All members of the group do this, building new ideas on ones suggested by others, and all the ideas are listed. The only rule is that no one can criticize or question an idea. That's editing. All ideas, even the stupidest ones, are accepted and built upon. Only after this portion of the session is over do they evaluate the ideas to see which ones might make sense, how they might be combined, and so forth. Creativity, then editing, never the two together. To create music requires a player and an instrument. If the guitar tries to play itself, the result is not good. There are two things that make a great instrument: the material and the craft with which it was made, and most important, the empty space within it. You are the instrument. You're not the player. Your experience makes you unique. The resonance of the wood, the shape of the sound box, the straightness of the neck, the quality of the strings. A great instrument, one that can produce rich sound, is worthy of the greatest player. Creativity is the willingness of the instrument to be still and respond to the player. It's the empty space that makes it sing. For those who've not experienced it, this sounds foolish. Surely Mozart was more than an empty box. But when he was asked how he wrote his music, he said, "I just hear it in my head and I write it down." Many of our greatest storytellers report that they begin a story or a novel even with a few characters and a situation. The story is actually told by the characters themselves, what they choose to say or do. If the story doesn't surprise me as it comes out, how can I hope that it will surprise the reader? Tom Waits, one of the most powerful contemporary American songwriters, has said, "You put yourself into some sort of a trance to receive certain songs. It's like setting a trap for a song. It's like fishing or anything else. You have to be real quiet to catch the big ones. But beyond art, great inventors like Thomas Edison, when he couldn't find a solution for some problem in a project, he would place a pie pan on the floor on either side of his chair, hold ball bearings in each hand, lean back with the problem in his mind, and drift off to sleep. His hands would relax, the metal bearings would fall with a crash into the pie pans and wake him up. And he reported that often, at the moment of awakening, coming back from the entrance to his subconscious, he would recognize a new solution to his problem. In all of these cases, it was not the so-called creative genius who produced the great results. It was his willingness to let go and be still and remain open to the genius ideas resonating through the subconscious antenna. But it's not just that easy. In addition to the willingness to let go of the ego, the creativity or performance I'm describing depends on something else as well. I could drift into my subconscious without ever hearing a Mozart symphony playing in my mind. And if I did, I wouldn't be able to just write it down as Mozart did. Expressing creativity to achieve peak outcomes as an inventor or an athlete or an artist or a poet also depends on the time, practice, commitment, and energy the individual has spent to become an exceptional instrument. Even the greatest connection to the creative force, when played on a cheap guitar, will be severely limited. An inspired artist who cannot draw or lacks the understanding of color is unlikely to produce great paintings. Of course, creativity is important in all of our lives. Most of us have had the experience of getting stuck on a problem, being unable to think our way through to a solution. Eventually, we give up, stop trying to come up with an answer, only to have it pop into our minds hours or days later, completely unexpectedly. We are all the instruments of our own lives. We've practiced being ourselves for years. So creative responses are available to all of us. And the ability to practice letting go and trusting our subconscious resources is there for everyone. For this reason, it's easy for us to become confused about a simple rule of creativity. It's beautifully stated like this: inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. If you wait around for the clouds to part and a bolt of lightning to strike you in the brain, you're not going to make an awful lot of work. All the best ideas come out of the process. They come out of doing the work itself. So creativity, like meditation, is a habit learned by practice. As a photographer, I took my camera out on the streets of Boston and Sao Paulo for an hour or more every day taking pictures. I developed the negatives when I got back home, and most of the images would be routine. But occasionally I'd find a photo or two on the roll that were amazing and remarkable. In most cases, I didn't remember taking or even seeing those images during my walk. It was as if someone else had taken them. I suspect Mozart sat down to compose every day, and perhaps he spent many hours of just practicing before those moments when the music started playing in his head. It is said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Or if those moments of creativity are lucky, it's also said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I would distill the key to creativity in your life and your work into 4 steps. First, practice being still. Learn to listen for the voice that you can't hear. Second, practice and study your chosen field. Make yourself the best instrument you can become. Third, do the work every day with stillness to give the creative more chances to play through you. And yes, You're going to fail 1,000 times, but every time you try, you'll get better and better at doing this. And fourth, set your question or problem in your mind to guide your antenna to tune into a useful station, and trust what comes, no matter how much your conscious mind may try to dismiss it. Avoid the temptation to judge or edit until the creative part of the process is over. If you train brains, your own or your clients, making the processing capacity more flexible and less judgmental is an important goal. Developing the ability to be still and present in the moment is another. Combine these two with the willingness to develop yourself, to define the area where you want to create, and the discipline of practicing every day, and you will find that your own access to the creative becomes central in your life. I believe you'll also find your awareness of the spiritual connection to everything around you develops and makes you a stronger, more resilient, and more complete person. Every brain has this antenna. It's rarely used in our popular culture, and you'll often find people who consider it unscientific or even foolish. What the conscious mind can't understand, it rejects. But in whole brain training, we focus on developing this state and this capacity in every cycle of training that we do. We know that it's easy to teach people to think. It's much more difficult to teach them to listen. But once it's been experienced, a brain's connection outside of itself makes the entire universe a richer, more complete, and powerful place. I wish you the best in your practice.